and 3 of the spouses.
Greetings again. We're on the road once more with the oral history microphone, and we're in Calvert City, Kentucky, and we're visiting in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Ed Odell. It's a beautiful day, and it's a beautiful home. And Ed, I regard you as a friend of a good many years. Thanks for letting me come.
Ray, I'm very glad to have you here. I hope some way we might add something to your oral history of Marshall County that might be of some benefit down the road if anyone ever wants to make reference to it.
Well, I know we have genealogists and people who are interested in these tapes, which, by the way, go to the library permanently and a copy over to the Murray State Pogue Library and the State Archives in Frankfort. So this is a state program, and it just so happens that Shelby McCallum bought the recorder and buys the tapes, and I donate my time, and we have a little fun. But first of all, we need to kind of nail you down to where you belong and find out about your roots. Who was your dad?
My dad was Archie Odell, and he was, where we trace it back, I can only trace back right now a couple of generations, and apparently his heritage came down the Ohio River and settled in this part of the country. He was a farmer and owned a little farm on the Tennessee River, and it was in the general vicinity of where the B.F. Goodrich plant is at the present time.
That area has changed a lot then. And your mother?
My mother was a Kincaid. Her name is Ollie, and she's still living, and they married as they did back then at a young age, and they lived their first housekeeping, I think, was in that general area that I spoke of there on the river.
Now, how many children in that family? You had at least one brother that I remember, Doris, who coached the Sharp Green Devils.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's 3 of us, Ray. Doris, of course, and he is 18 months older than I am, and I have a sister, Geneva, and she married John Counts, and she is about 2.5 years younger than I.
Mm-hmm. So that made a nice family unit. You were born right there, I guess.
Yes, Doris and I both were born in their original place that they lived after they married. My sister was born after they moved to Calvert City, which was only 2 miles away, but at that time the mode of transportation they had, why, it was rather long.
Well, where did you get underway with your education?
Well, of course, I went to school. As I said, they moved to Calvert City, and I went to the Calvert grade school all my life. And reflecting back on it, it was in a frame building. However, they had all 12 grades, and one of the early teachers that I can think of was Annie Smith. Annie taught here a number of years and then went to Florida and taught in the Florida school system, I think, and I'm not sure. I believe she is deceased now.
Now, can you think of any of those teachers that you believe had quite an influence on you in some way?
Well, yeah, I can recall 2 teachers in my early years that I thought an awful lot of, and I'm sure that they had a great deal of impression. And Ella Beasley, and she married Paul Stice, and Miss Ella recently passed away, and Laureen Combs at the time, and she married Clyde Smith. And those 2 ladies meant an awful lot to me in the early days. Of course, as I moved along in school, my future father-in-law, Jim Holland, had quite an impact, I think, on my thinking. And then I would class Ernest Pfizer in my high school days as one of my favorite teachers, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard some people say that Ernest Pfizer was the greatest teacher they ever saw, and others say, oh, he was too hard. Hey, was he sort of a disciplinarian?
Well, yes, I was exposed to Mr. Pfizer two different ways, both as a basketball player and as a student in his classroom. And I found then that because you played basketball for him, it certainly didn't make it easier in the classroom, because he expected people to go to school to get the best education that was available and apply themselves. And of course, the only thing he could do is try to make us accept that responsibility and to progress as well as we could with what we had to work with.
Now, you were impressed by that, and others were aggravated, I guess.
Well, I'm not sure that I wasn't aggravated back then, but reflecting back on it now, I can see see what it was.
Oh, that's great. Now, there were people that I remember from Calvert. When I started to college, there was a Goheen girl and Lucian Cornwell, and I guess Mr. Goheen had already gotten through, but he was principal out there for a while, wasn't he?
Well, Robert Goheen, was later, of course, than that. When I was there, Mr. B.G. Moore was principal, and he came here as a single person, and he married Dr. Little's daughter, Mildred Little. And they traveled with us to the basketball games and so on. But Lucian Cornwell is a name that was here, married a Goheen, but Lucian went to school at Sharp and graduated at Murray, and I was knew him there. And then in later, my senior year, Lucian's brother, the Cornwells, moved to Calvert. They were mail carriers out of the Little Cypress community, and then he got transferred to Calvert Post Office, and then Ed Bowers Cornwell was one of the sons, and he was a senior that year and an outstanding basketball player. And he went into the military and proved to be one of the boxers that they had. Back then they had golden gloves. It was very popular. And Ed Bowers made the Fort Knox Golden Gloves team and won a number of championships. And incidentally, Ray, there's an athletic field today at Fort Knox named after Ed Bowers Cornwell Field.
I remember a fellow that was at Calvert that was a little ahead of me. His name was Ed Freeman, and he was editor of the Ledger and Times when I started school at Murray.
Well, yes, I certainly remember Ed, and he was ahead of me some, but the first year that I was at Murray, Ed was a senior, and I think he's a legend at Murray. I heard an awful lot of Ed when I went there. He
kind of a legend in newspapers in Nashville. He became an editor down there.
Yes, but Ed was like the rest of us. He was a farm boy. He went to Murray dedicated to get his education. He certainly didn't have the finances, and he applied himself, and he worked hard, and he got some breaks, and he made the best of it.
That's, I love to hear stories like that, because I guess it's the thrill of the Horatio Alger story, rags to riches.
Yeah.
It's a good old American theme.
I believe Ed Freeman probably fell in that spot, the way he applied himself.
Did you play high school basketball?
Yeah, I tried that too, Ray. I was fortunate to have the chance to play with some outstanding basketball players, and consequently we won a few games and had the opportunity to make two trips to Lexington to the state tournament on those teams.
Now, wait a minute. Was that Eltis Henson involved in that?
No, this was Ernest Pfizer days.
Yeah.
Yes, Ernest Pfizer was here, and some of the names, of course, that we had then, James Merlin Solomon was, he was our big center. They referred to him in the Paducah Sun as the big center, and James Merlin is about 6'1", but that was a big man back then.
Mm-hmm.
And Buck Hurley, which you know over in Benton now, and Debbie T. Stice, and a couple of the Bryson boys, and so on. So we had pretty good basketball back then, and we'd lose 1 or 2 ball games a year. But we were fortunate, as I say. I'm a great basketball fan. Wife and I, we attend about all of them, and we've attended the state basketball tournament for many years, and we have reservations this year to go too. But I played in the old alumni gym at the University of Kentucky. If you know anything about the size of that, it was.
Oh, I remember being there.
It was a little cracker box, but the state high school tournament was played there.
Yeah. All right, now at Murray, what did you study?
Well, I was in social studies there, and history, and some of those things. I guess I went over there really not knowing what I was going to do. I thought that was the thing to do, but unfortunately, I did not finish. I had 2 years there, and times was pretty tough. And Ray TVA had fallen in the area about that time, and
It was about 37, 38.
well, yes, I started working in 38 with the TVA, and when I went in to get an application one morning, there must have been a couple of thousand people. That's as I view it now. I don't know how many was there, but it's a yard full up there trying to get a job, and I got an application, and it's one thing I always remember about that. I filled out the application, and the personnel guy began to interview me, and he said, "Have you done any work?" And of course, I was a young man then, and fortunately I'd been working with the highway department during the summer, and I'd had a few corns on my hands and this sort of thing. So that's what they was looking for, somebody could work. And he said, "Let me see your hands." And I showed him that, and I've always felt maybe that had something to do with it because I got a call in a week and got a chance to work. So I just worked at the TVA until I went into military.
Mm-hmm. Did you marry before the war or after?
I've married before. I married Kathleen and I have been married 47 years. And we married.
You're knocking on that golden anniversary.
Well, yes, it's not far away. And I married in 1939, and I didn't go into military to.
Where did you meet her?
Well, of course, she is a native of this area too, and we were in school, but I suppose we didn't know each other was there much until. It was her senior year, and I was a junior, and we started dating some, and
you suddenly noticed.
I suppose, yeah. and then we dated from time to time on up, and until I went to work, and I was at home more, and she was around, and then we, as I say, ultimately married in 39.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now you had to go off to service when? About 40.
I went on. No, I went in early part of 43, and I spent a little over 2 years. I got out in December.
What branch?
I was in the infantry, 2nd Infantry Division, and I spent 12 months in Europe. with the 2nd Infantry Division.
Yeah.
We were in France and in the Normandy part of France, in Brest, France, and then we moved into Belgium and Luxembourg, Germany, and ended up when the war was over. My group was in Czechoslovakia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you got home then, I suppose, what, about 45, 6 maybe?
Yeah, we got home on Christmas Eve in 45.
45.
Yes, so it's close to the,
Mhm.
46, yes.
Yeah. All right, now, when you came back, did you have any particular plans of what you'd do then?
Well, I really didn't, other than I knew, of course, under the GI Bill, I had my old job waiting for me if I wanted it, if it was still available. And it so happened the TVA, at that time I left, I was in their storeroom, and they had about 110 or 15 employees there, and I was in charge of the receiving department of the for TVA, and I came back to TVA and worked there a year, and the industry opened up in the Calvert area, and I was.
Now, let's see, our first plant was about 47, was it?
Well, the construction started in about 48. The first one went online in production in July 49.
Mm-hmm. That was the old Penn Salt.
Penn Salt, at that Pennsylvania Salt Manufacturing Company.
Goodrich
at that time.
got here fairly early, though.
Well, they were all here about the same time, Ray. Penwalt, as it is now, moved in, Pittsburgh Metallurgical Company, B.F. Goodrich, and National Carbide, as it was known then. They were the 4 original, and they all located here within about a year and a half of each other, yes.
We had, of course, a lot of people working toward that end. I'm sure TVA Development Group, the banks under Luther Draffin,
Yeah.
people of that
Oh, yeah.
kind were.
Yeah, it was a lot of community effort back then, and a great need for developing the community, because you can imagine little community of Calvert City sitting over here. We had no facilities such as utilities and sewer, water. It was all
Did the
wells
plants
and-
help you get that?
They were very cooperative in the early days. I was fortunate enough to be working in the plant as well as working on committees here to work with them, and they were very supportive of anything that we wanted to try. And the first water well that we sunk here, actually they put up the money and we hit a dry hole, but they never did second guesses. They continued to, and they were interested in the promotion of the community, because this is where they wanted their people to work and to live, and they certainly wanted the best for them in the education as well as recreation and this sort of thing.
Let's backtrack just a second here. I know this is the 50th anniversary of the 37 flood. Did the flood touch Calvert?
Oh yes, Calvert City, everything north of the Illinois Central Railroad, and of course, you know, back in the early days, the railroad was the hub of many of the communities in smaller communities, and everything north of the railroad pretty well was under water. And then it went under some of the viaducts and so on, and it backed up. Then it moved in on the south side of the railroad. And only the high part of Calvert City was out. In fact, where my mom and dad lived, they had about 2 feet of water in their house.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Murray at the time. When I got home, they let out school over there because of, I believe the school then was small enough that they had so many local people involved, and the flood touched all of us, so they just let school out. And So when I got home, my mom and dad had already moved out, and they were living with some neighbors in the community, and they had taken their furniture and put in the loft of the barn, and so most of that was salvaged, but the house itself, it took a pretty good beating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't want to forget that altogether. Now, to get back, we're here, and how did you get your first job? Did you just walk up and say, I want a job? Or?
Well, of course, my first job is I touched it a little while ago at TVA.
Not with TVA. Now, I should have said your second job maybe, but you finally wound up with a plant here, didn't you?
Well, yes. I started working with Penwalt Corporation, Pennsylvania Salt Manufacturing Company then, back in 1948, and it was the construction people were here, but I happened to have the opportunity to meet those people, or one or two of them, at a community meeting. Of course, then Mr. Luther Draftman was the driving force of the development, and they had meetings here, and he had some of the community and the organization of the Lions Club, first one thing to another. And so I had a chance to meet with the contractor, say hello to him, and he, in conversation, I told him what I'd been doing. I'd been involved in materials and purchasing and this sort of thing at TVA. So he was happened to be looking for somebody like that, and I just fell in the, and then I went from the contractor then directly to the plant. Mm-hmm.
The ball bounced just right.
Bounced just right. Just,
well,
yeah.
That's good. And did you stay with them how long?
I stayed with them for about 31 years. I was fortunate enough to see the plant from the time it started until I guess it got to its largest number of employees during that time. There was a constant growth period, and I was fortunate enough to stay with them during that period.
So you had your nose to the grindstone quite a bit. Well, let me ask you, did you take time out to serve society through civic clubs or anything of that nature?
Well, yes. Of course, there was a great interest back then, as I stated a little before, both by the industrial people and the local people, to improve our community for what looked like was going to be a major economic boost, and we all pitched in some, and I had the opportunity to serve with a number of committees back then, and I served as president of the PTA here at the Calvert School one year, and I served the North Marshall High School one year. I was fortunate to be the first president of the Calvert City Lions Club when it was formed.
And they were sort of the leaders in community projects in many ways.
Almost everything developed out of that, because the Lions Club then, Ray, was a little bit different than most Lions Club. It included anybody in the community, regardless. We had people that were working on the IC Railroad. We had people that were farmers, business people, plant people, you name it. We had
real cross-section.
Real cross-section, yes.
And you were the first president.
I was fortunate enough to be the first president, yes.
Well, I know you had a lot of projects. You tried to improve the schools, the city, the streets. Did you ever get involved in city government?
Yeah, well, of course, as the need arose for some type of organization to coordinate a lot of the things, and I was young and I guess full of energy back then, and yes, I served two different terms on the city council here in Calvert, And we went through some interesting periods then. Of course, we had suits and countersuits to incorporate, not incorporate. You know, there's always two sides to everything, and until we could get our thoughts all together, well, we had our rough periods, but thank goodness the minds were flexible enough and open enough that once we could all see what was going on, well, I think we all pitched in. And
With a
got the job
community
done.
growing like that, I know you wanted, well, better medical facilities, physicians in the area. Trailer came and Colburn was here for a long, long time. In fact, he was mayor for an awful long period, wasn't he?
Oh yes, we had this community has a history. I think have been very fortunate to have doctors in the community, and one that I've heard my parents talk about was Dr. Jones was here back early, and then Dr. W.T. Little back in my teenage days, and Dr. Smith. And then we had a lull. They were getting older. And we had a lull in here, a period that we were not getting any new physicians. Then when the industry came in, why, everybody was having to go to Paducah for medical treatment pretty well from industry. So they, some way or another, was able to make contact with the younger doctors, and Dr. Coburn came in as a young doctor shortly after the plants came here, and then Dr. Traylor followed shortly after. And they've been a blessing, of course, to this community, and both with their medical help and their civic. They were so civic-minded, and of course, both of them has served on many civic groups, and Dr. Coburn was mayor for many years, and Dr. Traylor was on the school board, and as I say, we've just been very fortunate to have people of that nature to come in and accept responsibility in the community and see that it moves.
Did you ever have a community chest, United Givers Fund, or anything?
Yeah, well, Ray, that's another thing that actually was a spin-off from the Lions Club. Back in the early days, as you can imagine, when the industry came, and we've never had anything of that nature, why, every organization that ever made a drive for anything would hit the doors of the plants, and there's wanting contributions. So through the cooperation of the Lions Club and the management of the four industries that we'd already mentioned here, why, the United Fund was formed, and that would, to make one drive, give the people an opportunity to make the contribution and not have someone knocking on everybody's doors every week.
Yeah.
So the United Fund was organized, and again, that's another organization that I had the privilege of serving as its president at one time and as its secretary on two other occasions. And it has certainly done a great job. Spinning off from that, of course, is your Recreation Association here. We have a great recreation program in Calvert City.
Scout troops and all sorts of things.
Yes, the Boys and the Girl Scouts was in it.
Now, having been in the military, did you ever get wound up in the American Legion or anything? Or?
Well, yes, of course, when I got back, all the conversation and talk then was because it wasn't many homes it wasn't touched some way or another with the military people, and so when I got back, they'd already formed American Legion post here in Calvert City, and it was William A. Doyle Post. It was named after a casualty from this area, and I had the privilege of serving it as commander during one of the early formative years, and during that time, we built the existing building that's still being used by that post here in Calvert City by donated labor and everything by the veterans that had just got back in.
The time is just flitting very rapidly, and we haven't mentioned any children you might have had.
Well, Kathleen and I have two children, Kay, and she married and has two children. Barry Travis is her husband, and Barry is a sales person with the Southern School Supply Company, and Kay is a student counselor at Marsh County High School.
Mm-hmm.
The other daughter is Jana, and she married William Jordan. Now, he is a regular Army officer. He's currently stationed in Korea. And Jana is with us during his stay over there, but they travel all over the country and never know where one assignment is. We, as one of our highlights last year, Ray, we got to visit with them in Honolulu for a period of time when they were stationed over there.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we're down to a little more than a minute. Do you have any final thing you'd like to say?
Ray, there's one thing that I didn't touch on that I